Okay. So the title of this video is I Need One Cop to Switch Sides, and specifically one Canadian cop. So I just actually looked it up, and apparently there's 71,472 cops in Canada. That's as of May 15th, 2023. So 71,000 cops. The title again is I Need One Cop to Switch Sides. Okay. If you've seen my other videos, I've talked about Claim of Christ, the idea of someone coming to save the world, an avatar Messiah, and I made the point that if you take a cop today, any cop in Canada, and if you go back 2,000 years, that cop's basically a Roman soldier. And that Roman soldier, as most of us know, killed an innocent man. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So what I've come to realize is the line is the police. There's the government, there's Christians, there's Catholics, there's priests. But at the end of the day, the police are going to enforce whatever they're told. So now I've gone pretty hard at the cops in a little bit more intense videos, we can say. So I'm going to kind of make this one hopefully a little bit lighter, but please don't ignore or negate the truth and the seriousness of this conversation. So what I'm basically saying is the whole universe is truth except humans. Okay. Now, when you lie, why do you have tells? Why does your body react? You can say morally and different things like that, but say you're playing poker and it's a game, so you're allowed to lie, you're allowed to bluff. If you and your body are one, and if you're telling the truth, why would your body react? Okay, so I'm going to go through these little bits quickly because I've talked extensively in other videos, but if you imagine that the whole universe is this one energy or this one consciousness, the idea of in the beginning there was God, only God, so there's no anything, there's no nothing, there's just God. Scientifically, energy can't be created or destroyed. So in the beginning, there's a fixed amount. So it doesn't really matter which way you look at it because they're kind of saying the same thing. But I'll use the dream analogy. So if this is my dream, it's all my consciousness. Okay. So imagine that the entire universe is this one truth, the will of God. And then the only thing that's not truth is your free will, your choice, your thought, your perspective, however you want to describe it. But what that would mean is everything is this one energy. The walls, the computer, the camera, even me and my entire physical body. And then there's my will. So that's kind of what I'm pointing at is imagine that you're more of a vessel, but imagine your physical body, even though it's your tool, it's separate. And that's why when you choose to lie, your body may still have a reaction. The reaction being, because if your body is actually serving the will of God or the universal energy, imagine it's all truth. So the lie would act in, I guess, opposite or contradictory to the truth. There's a quote, the universe doesn't like secrets. It conspires to reveal the truth. It leads you to it. So this is what this is all about, is the truth. Okay. So when I say I need one cop to switch sides, I've given a little kind of dramatic analogy before. I actually did this with a police officer, but I was saying to him, imagine there's 20 of you or 100 of you, and there's a little standoff and you're all pointing your guns at me because you think I'm a criminal or I'm crazy or whatever reason. But imagine all of a sudden one of you believes me. And this is the cool part, because if one of you believes me, there's going to be 2, 3, and I think it's going to multiply exponentially. But the key is that one. Biblically, there's a quote, I don't know how to source it, I haven't looked yet, but where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am. So imagine that's God speaking. Now, assume that I'm telling the truth. You don't have to believe it. But if I'm telling the truth and I'm alone, I need one more person. So anyone could kind of believe me and say, join me in that sense. The problem is on my own, I don't really have any credibility because everyone thinks I'm fucking nuts. But if somebody respectable sided with me and started telling people about me, it would lend some credibility. But we would still be faced with the government and the police. So that's why I specifically key on the police. So the scenario is, imagine that, 20 or 100, you have your guns pointed at me, and then all of a sudden one of you believes me. And imagine if it's a Christian or a Catholic. They would actually have to switch sides, would have to stand in front of me, would literally have to defend me with their life, and would probably, in a more tense situation, would have to draw their gun or have their gun out and point it at other cops. And what I'm basically saying at that point, we break the whole world. We basically not even just stalemate the board, we beat it. Okay. And I say we, because at the end of the day, I'm not in opposition to any individual and any cop. You know, the system's a little broken and sometimes you guys make some bad choices. Um, but leaving all that aside, we should be working together. I'm literally here to save the world peacefully without telling anyone what to think, what to do, what to believe. I've said in other videos, my responsibility isn't to tell you who you are. My responsibility is to tell you who I am, because that's the singularity in Masonic lore. It's the great work. I've called it the great, world story. So we all have 8 billion of us. We have our individual stories. If you imagine one of us is here to tell the world story, um, not to get into weird conspiracy stuff, but you picture that symbol, the all-seeing eye. Imagine you see past the filter of time and you have this magical, divine, prophetic story, quantum entangled, and you have to deliver it. Now, your hands are tied because you can't use force, control, authority on anyone else. You can't tell anyone, again, what to think, what to do, or what to believe. But imagine you're telling the truth. And imagine you possess the truth to the point where you also possess the word of God. In the beginning was the word, it created everything. Imagine you come up with the word and you could actually heal and fix everything without any imposition. But your hands are tied because if nobody believes you and if nobody's listening. Okay, so I've had a conversation with a bunch of cops. I'm going to just quickly tell you like 3 or 4, like not into significant detail. I've done it in other videos where there was a cop one day, he was working at the train tracks and he was, for the crossing for the kids going to school. They were already in school, so there was nobody there. I walked up to him. It was kind of funny. I'm like, hey, bud, I'm like, you want to have the most fucked up conversation you ever had? And he started laughing and he thought about it. He's like, sure, why not? And I kind of went through the Moses, Jesus, and Abraham stories. Moses talked to the burning bush. Jesus talked to the devil on the edge of a cliff. Abraham talked to took his son up a hill with a knife, and I won't go into the detail. And I basically went through those scenarios with the cop, and it was kind of funny because I said, what if you saw me talking to a bush right now? And he kind of laughed, and we went through it, and he'd say, see how weird it was, and I'm like, imagine it's weird, and then I resist, and we went through the scenario that he might have to call back up, may have to use force, I might get tasered, I might get cuffed, I'd be taken to a mental institution and probably evaluated. So the next scenario was at the edge of a cliff. And his answers were great. He's like, no, I have to do something because you're at the edge of a cliff. It's imminent danger. Same scenario. I'd probably, be tasered, cuffed, locked up, taken to a mental institution. The third scenario, heaven forbid, I didn't even want to say me, but imagine someone's going up a hill with a kid and a knife saying they're going to kill him because God told them to. He's like, he's stopping that guy for sure. I'm like, if you only have one headshot, he's like, yeah, I would take that shot to save the kid. I'm like, perfect. And this cop was Jesuit. So I think that's a branch of Catholicism and fairly serious. He acknowledged that he believes in Christ. He believes in the story. He believes this person's going to come save the world. So I look at him and I'm like, listen, I agreed with everything you just said, but I just introduced you to Moses, Jesus, and Abraham. I said, you shot one in the head, you tasered the other two, and you have them locked up in a mental institution getting medicated. And he had a pretty cool reaction. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I never even thought about that. And he's like, we probably already killed him. And then I kind of made the joke. I'm like, you haven't killed him yet. I said, it's me. I haven't told anyone. And he did look at me a little bit weird. But anyway, he was a cool cop. We had a cool conversation. I've had a couple other conversations. I had a little bit of a standoff a couple of years ago. A lady said I made a threat, which, I mean, I don't even fight guys that are smaller than me. I've been in about 20, 25 hockey fights, and I always pick somebody bigger. I wouldn't even want to fight somebody smaller than me, not dismissing how tough they could be, but it just doesn't feel right. So the idea of me threatening a girl or hitting a girl, I had an older sister, we lived in the same house over 20 years. I never hit her once. You just don't hit girls. So the idea of me threatening a lady, now she was Asian, so obviously it was the communication barrier, but I was surprised by the cops. I was at a hotel because I thought, I have no one to bail me out. I had no one advocating for me. Sometimes court cases take up to a year or even more to go through. I really thought I was going to be locked up for a whole year. And that was, a pretty scary notion, especially because I didn't do anything. I dropped off a presentation. Okay. So we had a standoff, but obviously I didn't have any weapons. So basically he was just trying to keep the situation calm. And I was basically just stretching out as long as I can. After I think it was probably 2.5 hours, SWAT showed up. And at that point I surrendered myself. But we had an amazing conversation and I went through my thesis. I'm not going to do that now. I've had other videos. But I'll be honest, he looked up at me and he's like, Mark, he's like, this is the most fascinating I've ever had. Now, this is interesting, and to the cops, I should have probably went to the Black Creek and Truthui division. I don't know the number of it because that was the area that this alleged crime took place. But they never took me there. Imagine me spewing off for 2.5 hours about like mysticism, quantum physics, prophecy, entanglement. And, I've probably read a couple thousand books on all the world religions, like again, mysticism, spirituality, quantum physics, psychology. So it was interesting. So here's the thing. They didn't take me to the Truthui branch or division. They took me to Keel and Finch. And what I realized, and I didn't realize this till after, is that there was nobody else in any of the cells. So they didn't want me talking to anyone else. Okay. So that was kind of funny. So they kept me in the cell. But this is the interesting part is I had to come out of my cell to get fingerprinted. And I'm sitting in a room and there's 2 cops there. They weren't on the scene. They were already at the station. And they're like, Mark, we want to hear about this. They're like, we don't meet people like you. And we literally sat in the office, I'm going to say for like 30, 40 minutes, but we sat there for a good half hour and we talked. And I went into different entanglement and different synchronicities. And we talked about like Haile Selassie and numerology and all these different things. And they're like, this is amazing. Like, this is fascinating. But at the end of the day, none of you are really in a position to do anything. And I need you to really start thinking about this. The other one was I was with, this is at the Keelan 401, Keelan Wilson Hospital, and it was an Indian cop. I wish I did remember his name. We talked for a couple hours because I had to get checked into the hospital, and because it was a wellness check, he couldn't leave. So we just sat next to each other. We shot the shit for like 2 hours plus. And at the end, he didn't say, Mark, you're a deep thinker. He's like, Mark, you're the deepest thinker I've ever met. He says, you're asking questions, he said, that I can't answer. And he's like, you're asking questions that I don't think anyone can answer. But this is about saving the world. This is about potentially the Son of God. This is about not just my salvation, but the salvation of the entire planet and Canada for it's the whole world, obviously it includes Canada. So, but I said to him, don't we need to answer these questions? They're important. And like literally when you're looking at the pain, the suffering, the war, poverty, the torture, human trafficking, everything going on, the corruption, and then even just mental health, depression, the hopelessness. These are questions that need answering. Okay. So those are a couple of scenarios. Again, he's like, you're the deepest thinker I've ever met. The other cop's like, we don't meet people like you. So I hope that I've almost built some allies, and it's not just you guys. Because listen, I know that my mind has slipped. In the year 2000, I had a drug-induced psychosis. 4 or 5 years later, I actually stayed up for like 7 or 8 days straight. And you guys know, I think you can only, this might be in the movies, but you can only detain somebody for like 48 hours because if you keep them up longer than that, their mind will slip and you can kind of manipulate it. Well, I stayed awake for 7, 8 days straight and my mind slipped. And then I had a couple other, and then I did have one kind of mystical, on the verge of mysticism and psychosis in 2014. And I kind of go into an Archangel Michael story there. So anyway, coming back to this is basically what I want to say. Now, you guys think I'm nuts, but another video I kind of questioned, with a psychiatrist, is my mom not nuts, who believes in the guy that born of a virgin, walks on water, turned water into wine, rose people from the dead, and is coming back 2,000 years later. That sounds pretty crazy to me. I did talk to a police officer's father. His name's Bill Mullally. His son is Joseph Mullally. This is kind of funny because if you're watching this, Joseph, you think I'm nuts. That's cool. The mental institution was 999 Queen Street, not 99 Queen Street. But imagine you're looking at a mirror and you're looking in the reflection. So imagine you actually have it wrong and not me. Okay. But here's the question I asked your dad. I said, imagine, Bill, you're standing on the edge of a cliff. On one side, you have your son, who is, sorry, I'm out of camera here. Your son, who is Officer Joseph Mullally. And on the other side, imagine you have Christ. Now, they're both about to fall off the cliff at the same time, and you can only save one of them. Who are you saving? Joseph, your dad didn't even bat an eye. He's like, Christ. And I'm like, you're going to let your son die for this individual? He's like, yes, 100%. That sounds pretty crazy in itself. Now, my position is the world's fucked. We might need a little bit of crazy. And I think everyone's kind of nuts to their own degree, maybe me a little bit more. Okay, so thinking that your father, who's a great man, would let you die to save this magical divine being, this stranger, and I made a joke in the other video that you've never met, but potentially you have, if my claim is true. So this is some of the things I want to talk about. Okay, now, the thing about lying and your body reacting, it goes against our nature. Okay. So if you're looking in a mirror, everything's a reflection. So you're seeing it as opposite, even though everything you see is real, it's there, but you're acting through the filter of time, through the reflection. So imagine we're just missing it. So I've said before in other videos, this is the eternal now, or God, the eternal, infinite, and timeless. It takes time to hear that, to see it, and then to react emotionally, intellectually. So it's almost like if you look in the mirror, by the time the reflection comes back. But the point is if this is God and there's you in your dimension of time, look how close you are to the truth. And imagine it's just a filter of your perception or your thought. It's the part of you that measures, that judges, that quantifies. And this goes to the quantum physics, because if you're not quantifying, the particle turns to a wave and it transcends time and space. So religion and quantum physics and science is kind of saying the same thing now. And so I'm going to go with that. So this is what I want you guys to think about. The whole world's in darkness. Now, if you're not familiar, there's Plato's cave simile. And this is amazing because this is like a few thousand years ago. And to think, we think we're so intelligent because we have all this technology and all this information, but we're kind of clueless. And it's like people from 2,000-3,000 years ago potentially and did possess more wisdom and intelligence and knowledge. And his story applies to today. So it kind of transcends time. So imagine we're all in a cave, the entire world. We're all in darkness. I think there's like a fire up behind, like at the top of the cave, but we can't see it. But it's enough kind of light to flash to make shadows and to cast shadows upon the wall. So think if all our philosophy and our religion and our bureaucracy and all our laws and rules are based on the shadows, and you kind of know a shadow doesn't really mean anything. I'm kind of showing a shadow right now in the video, and it's the most insignificant thing here. Okay, so we're all in the darkness. Now, the story is of what if somebody grabs one of you and pulls you out of the darkness. Now, when you wake up in the morning and somebody flips on the light, how bright it is in your eyes, you can't see. Imagine being in darkness for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden somebody flips on you go into sunlight, your eyes would be burning. They would be searing. You would be blind. It might take you a few days or a week even to kind of adjust to the light. But at a certain point, you would see not just the colors, but you would see the sun casting its light, hitting a tree, and then casting a shadow. And then you would realize that the shadows are insignificant and they don't mean anything. Okay? So this story is about coming out of the darkness into the light, or coming out of ignorance. So what I'm basically saying, and this relates to Albert Einstein when he says, you can't solve a problem on the same level of thinking that it was created on. Well, every single problem has been created by thought. It's been created by humans. So if thought is the actual problem, it can't be solved on that level, which is kind of where wisdom or a certain transcendental aspect comes into it, whether divinity, prophecy, quantum entanglement. It's more than simple thought. Okay, so now imagine I've come out of the cave and I've seen the light. And the other thing is, if you come out of the cave and you see all this, you wouldn't really want to go back into the cave and live in this darkness and in a bunch of rocks and shadows and ignorant people. At the same time, I'm sure there's going to be people that you love and care about that are in the cave. So you would at least probably go back in to try to bring them out and to try to save humanity. But they're going to laugh at you. They're going to think you're nuts. They're going to say, oh, you left the cave, you got probed, or all this stuff happened to you. And again, the more serious thing is if you started to make sense. Because if you started to make sense and you threatened the shadows, the philosophy, the bureaucracy, the religion, they would probably kill you. Okay. So now, but imagine you've come out, you've seen the light, and now you're going back in to save everyone. And imagine in the cave, there's police, or 2,000 years ago, like I said, that police officer would be a Roman soldier. Okay. So now you go back into the cave. Nobody's going to believe you. You're either going to get locked up, killed, or institutionalized. They have the same services in the cave as in the real world. But now this is what I want you to imagine. This isn't a violent thing, but say I grab one of the police officers and I drag them out of the cave. Now, if it's Joseph, he's going to be crying and screaming, and he's going to run back to mommy and daddy. But, imagine I force Joseph out of the cave, and, you kind of stake him out of the cave so he can't get back in. Again, his eyes would be burning. He'd be searing. He'd probably be crying and really scared, but that's okay, Joseph. But imagine after a few days, he sees the light, and he sees the tree, and he sees the shadow, and he realizes the truth. This is what this is about. It's about the truth. Now, I've said what I think doesn't matter, and I'm not being dismissive, but what you think doesn't matter, kind of with that Albert Einstein quote, can't solve it on. So what matters is the truth in the middle. And we should all be moving towards the truth. Whether you're white, black, whether you're Asian, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, Sunni, Shiite, whether you're French, English, American, Canadian, from Africa, Asia, it doesn't matter. We should all be moving towards the truth. The point is, though, is what if somebody's already there? What if somebody's seen the light? You're not going to recognize it, especially if his only power is words. And the truth is that we're all this one energy and this one consciousness. And if you can't see the truth within yourself, you're not going to see it in me or anyone else. I don't care if you're Christian, Catholic, a priest, a pastor, a bishop, a cardinal, right up to the Pope. Christ could walk up to you today and you're going to deny him. Now, I know there's some Christians that say, oh, no. That's arrogant and that's ridiculous and that's stupid. And it's also judgmental, especially about the guy that said, do not judge. So if he walked up to you today, you're going to reject him. And the reason is if you can't see the truth within yourself, how are you going to see it anywhere else? It would be impossible. Okay. But now imagine me and Joseph, both are out of the cave. He's seen the light. Even if we're mortal, bitter enemies, we now have something in common because he's going to want to save his family and friends and the people he loves. And I'm going to want to do the same thing. And it makes sense now for us to become allies. Okay. And that's kind of the point of this video. I'm going to make this one shorter. We're at 20 minutes. I'm not going to go off for like 40 minutes an hour. I've done those long videos. So this one is going to be relatively short, but that's basically the point. I've talked in other videos about if it snows and imagine it's all white and this is pristine snowfall, hasn't been touched. And a bunch of us go outside, but imagine without knowing we have a filter over our eyes, kind of like the filter of time or the filter of your perception or looking in the mirror, the reflection. But imagine the 3D glasses. So someone has red, another person has blue, green, yellow, purple, and all these different colors, orange. And we're all looking at the snow, which is white. But we're all seeing it through the filter and through the color. So imagine again, there's war and our family's been warring, all through time and what was it, the Hatfields and the McCoys or whatever. And at a certain point, imagine anyone, but say me and Joseph are about to do battle. In 1 second, imagine both of our filters fall off at the same time. So now in 1 second, we realize it's not red or blue, that it's white. And this isn't like racial. It's not white and black or anything like that. It's just that we're talking about snow. Don't eat yellow snow. If it was yellow, I'd be talking yellow, but it's white. So all of a sudden, we both realize it's white. And even though we might hate each other, been battling our whole lives, the next time we look at each other, there's going to be a different look in our eyes because we've come out of the cave and seen the light, or we've seen the snow. Okay. Now, at that point, we have a greater responsibility because we've now seen the truth. And this is what I want you to understand. Imagine if I come out of the cave and I grab one cop to come out with me. We're going back in the cave. It's not all the police potentially against me. It's now me and this officer, Joseph, and it doesn't have to be against because there shouldn't be conflict. I'm not here to fight the police. I'm here to save the world, and we should be working together. But that's what I need, is I need one of you to see the light or to see the truth, or at least question the possibility of it, and then hear my story, because then that ends time, and that fulfills the prophecy, or as Albert Einstein called it, spooky action at a distance, or quantum entanglement. So I'm not going to go through the whole entanglement and the whole story. Plenty of other videos I've done already explaining that. But this is the point of the video, is I need one cop to switch sides. And if that happens, we save the world. I'm ready to roll with this. I can explain this 100 different ways. I can basically start at any point and connect it all. And this is a theory of oneness, a unified or universal field theory. I've explained it before. It's only going to be one person, because if you have your theory, you unify the whole universe, all time and space. You can't be outside of that theory, because then you have a theory of two-ness. You would have to unify yourself with everything you're talking about. And there's your quantum entanglement, there's your prophecy, and that's where the whole story would come into play. So I kind of think that that's basically all I'm talking about, and that's basically it. So I'm going to leave one actually final point, because I'm talking about duality. But say you're in an argument with somebody, or you're fighting with somebody. It could be a husband against wife, or it could be a relationship. It could be a cop against a criminal, or even two cops arguing themselves. It doesn't matter who it is, okay? You can go black and white, whatever the issue is. You have two people, and they're in conflict, and they're fighting back and forth. Imagine if I enter the conversation or the argument, Okay. All of a sudden, people want to go from two-ness to oneness, but you can't go from 2 to 1. You almost have to go from 2 to 3, and then you can get to oneness. So 2 points are linear, and then you basically have a line time, and you have that conflict. Once there's a third point, imagine it triangulates. My point isn't going to be the final point or the final truth over yours. But imagine there's your perspective, the person you're fighting with, and then I come in as the third point, and you triangulate that, and imagine we find the truth in the middle. So here's the point. If it's actually a physical altercation, now I'm not claiming to be a tough guy or anything like that, and I'm sure there's plenty of cops in training that are tougher than me. But if you're about to fight, say 2 cops are about to fight each other, if I enter the conversation or enter the fight, you guys aren't looking at each other anymore. You both have to look at me because, hey, I'm still like 230, 240 pounds. If I side with one of you, I tip the scales. So now forget about the violence and fighting democratically. I'm the swing vote. So all of a sudden, instead of you guys fighting each other, you both have to look at me and almost argue or try to convince me of your point because I'm the swing vote. I can tip the scales. And then once that happens and you stop looking at each other and you find the third point within the argument, then we triangulate and you find the truth in the middle. And that's basically what I'm getting at. This is how we end conflict. I need somebody to believe me. I need somebody to listen, or I need somebody to give me a chance. I've presented my legal case, being circumcised, the Canadian Charter of Rights that claims to recognize the supremacy of God. I'm not going to start chirping on all that now. Like I said, this is to be a little bit more lighthearted, but I need you guys to see it. I would love to sit down right now with 100 cops and talk. But the thing is you're either going to take me to a station and either arrest me, or you're going to take me to a mental institution and institutionalize me. If those are the conditions of our conversation, we're not talking. You're trying to control me or silence me. So I would love to sit down and talk, but I also don't want to get trapped. And, you guys put out some breadcrumbs or some cheese and, put me into the mouse trap or whatever. If it's on good faith, I would literally love to sit down in person and to explain this. But I really need one of you to listen because I do have a world to save. And this isn't a threat. It's a simple truth. If it comes down to a child dying or an adult, whether it's me, you, or anyone, I would rather see an adult die over a child. And there's too many kids suffering right now. It's disgusting what's going on. I'm not even going to go into the details. Everyone knows what's happening. Children are being starved to death. Children are being maimed, bombed, killed, not to mention being trafficked and raped. This is a conversation for adults now, and we need to have the conversation. But I can't have it under you. I can't have it being manipulated. I don't want to claim king in heaven of earth and trump you. But you've seen my other videos. If you're watching this one, or you're going to. And once you hear the case, I need somebody to wake up, guys. I don't carry a gun. I don't have a gun. You guys do. You claim power, authority, and control over me, and I'm not spitting that back in your face. But if I'm king of heaven and earth, it doesn't work that way anymore. And in the same way that when you took me to jail, you put me in a cell by myself, you put me in prison, I'm not a criminal. Your acts against me would be criminal. They'd be war crimes. I would be a hostage. Now, as king of heaven and earth, I could pardon everyone in the jail. I could deputize everyone in the jail. Okay? And I can empower them to deputize anyone else. I know this sounds really extreme and kind of ridiculous, but imagine if it's true. Okay? So I'm going to leave it here. You guys are from Toronto. So am I. Think of Jane and Finch, Jungle, Chalk Farm, Cabbagetown, Regent Park, Willowridge, Scarlet Courts. You guys have had probably conflicting, and that just screwed my whole video. All right, because I shouldn't have gone there. And that's cool. And I'm telling you now, my phone just rang. And that's the energy around me. I'm accountable, but I'm accountable to something bigger than what you can see. When I slip, when I go too far, something corrects me. So I'm going to let that part of the conversation go. And I'll even apologize for bringing it up. But I need you to know how serious this is. Okay? This kid I used to know, well, I still know, anytime she would get rude or mouth off or have a little bit of attitude, she would knock over a glass. She would stub her toe. She would drop something. And I looked at this kid and I'm like, oh, God's paying attention to you. And her words were, God doesn't like me. And I said, no, 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 no. I said, if he's correcting you, that means he's paying attention. That means you're special. And this is what I'm talking about. When your energy slips, imagine it's realigned. And that's my responsibility, is stay in this moment and stay true to it. Because there's been a revelation and it's being shown to me. And I'm going to continue to share it. But I need help. I'm alone. And I'm peaceful. And I'm trying to do good. And I'm telling the truth. Potentially a universal or magical divine truth. Where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am. Hebrew 1:8, the Father says unto the Son, O God. God doesn't call him Jesus or the Son. He literally calls him God. That means the Father and the Son are one. That means there's a quantum entanglement. That means the prophecy has been fulfilled. I could use some help. I could use some integrity, some honor, and some honesty. I plan to be completely transparent, but it doesn't help if nobody's listening, especially when my hands are tied. And I'll leave it at that.